It's 11 a.m. on February 10th, 2009. 40-year-old police officer David Ford is off duty, relaxing at home.
David is a highly respected police officer in his community. He goes the extra mile to make sure it's safe.
But despite his best efforts, danger lurks where it's least expected. And today, it's found its way into David's home.
The fact that a crime as heinous as this happens in broad daylight to an officer of the law, it's enough to make you ask, is anyone truly safe?
Has the simple act of being a police officer put a target on David Ford's back? Or is his murder one that hits much closer to home than anyone realizes?
A 911 call is placed and the caller says, "I need an ambulance. My husband's been shot in the head."
What begins as the hunt for a killer follows a twisting road of lies and deceit until nearly 3 years later, the person who pulled the trigger is brought to justice. An hour and a half from the great gateway to the south, Louisville, Kentucky, lies the quaint community of Campbellsville.
Campbellsville itself has a population of about 11,000, 12,000 people. It's a kind of a rural area. Everyone generally knows everyone. There's a lot of farms. There's a lot of churches.
There's lots of history in Campbellsville. It's especially photogenic. From Green River Lake State Park to the Green River Bridge battlefield, all the way to the Peddler's Mall, Campbellsville is so much more than meets the eye.
It's a good place to grow up and to raise children. There's a relatively low crime rate. You know, you go anywhere, you see someone you know, it's just a nice, pleasant place to be.
That's why Officer David Ford hasn't strayed far, even after all these years. David Ford is born on May 24th, 1968, to parents Betty and Ronald Ford. As one of 3 children, David and his siblings are proud to call the small town home.
Growing up in a small town like this, it's paradise. Your neighbors are your friends, everyone is a familiar face. It's a simpler way of life.
Growing up in this family of 5, David's close to his family, and he's comfortable in a busy household.
David no doubt has a strong sense of family and hometown pride rooted within him. He's a Kentucky boy through and through.
Betty and Ronald's marriage ends in divorce, but David doesn't let that sway his thoughts on starting a family of his own.
David's sister Kathleen and brother Daryl have both stayed in Campbellsville to raise their families. So there's obviously nowhere else David would like to raise his own.
David meets his first wife, and they begin expanding their own family.
David has 3 sons with his first wife, further cementing his roots in Taylor County.
David is well liked, both as an officer and around the community. You can often find him sipping on his Mountain Dew and cracking a joke.
He was a fun guy, liked to joke and play around, and was just a general good man. He was a very fun-loving, fun kind of guy who liked to protect people, and that's why he really wanted to become a police officer.
David has spent his life in Taylor County. He knows the community, his neighbors, and his family are all here. He cares about the people, and he wants to protect them. David's first marriage ends, and he meets Tanya Michelle Simpson. They marry. She becomes Mrs. Tanya Ford, and they soon add a child to their union. Soon after the birth of his 4th son, David Ford follows his dreams.
Training to become a police officer is not for the faint-hearted. It takes a lot of determination and sheer willpower.
Basic training for a police officer in Kentucky involves learning about proper procedures, firearms, criminal law. You also undergo physical training, among other things.
Training to be a cop is hard work, yet David has all the skills to push through, and he graduates from the academy in good standing. Then the real work begins.
David gets one of his first tastes of the law when he becomes the only police officer overseeing the small community of Bradfordsville, a half-hour drive north from his home in Campbellsville.
Small town work can be slow. It's nothing like a big city.
Being on his own in a small community with such a low crime rate, it's likely David wants something a little more professionally fulfilling.
David wants to protect others, and moving to a larger department might provide more fulfillment and make him feel like he's making more of a difference. Also, David likes to joke around, so it'll be nice to have fellow police officers around instead of working all alone.
So, David Ford makes a switch to the police department in Lebanon, Kentucky, about 20 minutes from Campbellsville.
It's not a huge city, just a small town of 6,000. But considering Bradfordsville has a population of around 270 people, Lebanon, Kentucky feels like a booming metropolis in comparison.
David Ford settles into life minutes outside of Campbellsville with his second wife, Tanya, and their son, Adam, as well as sons David, Brian, and Austin from David's first marriage. Tanya also has 3 children, Brooklyn, Stephen, and Blake from previous relationships. So David now has 4 children and 3 stepchildren. Tanya is known around Campbellsville. She's a friendly face, serving at her local restaurant. She's also a very devoted, loving mother, and she has a good relationship with her kids.
She was a very dedicated mom, loved being a mom. She worked several jobs in the community. She worked at some restaurants, factory work, those sort of things. Was always a very hard worker. Was very dedicated to supporting her children and being involved in their lives.
Tanya is supportive of David and his career.
Being an officer's wife can be emotionally taxing. It's scary to have your partner constantly putting themselves in harm's way to protect others while potentially making enemies.
Her husband is providing for their family, even if the job comes with some risk. Plus, he's dealing with criminals when he's out in the world. When he's with her and the kids, he's not.
He's just good old dad. And David's a good father. After every shift, he's straight home. He never goes out after a shift and socializes. He wants to get home and be with his young children.
Tuesday, February 10th, 2009, days before Valentine's Day.
Love should be in the air, but instead, a storm is brewing.
David's off duty, enjoying time to himself. He and Tanya have an appointment with their tax consultant later in the day.
At 11 a.m., David heads to his home office and turns on his computer, looking to catch up on a few things online.
He's having a cigarette, reading the daily news. He's totally in his own little world.
It's his day off. This is a no-stress day.
David Ford is not thinking about work at all. He's not thinking about criminals or crime. He's certainly not thinking that an intruder could be infiltrating his own home.
As David reads the news, the intruder makes their way behind him, draws a handgun, and fires at the back of David's head.
David slumps forward onto the desk and then collapses to the carpeted floor.
This isn't just a murder, it's an execution. A short time later, Tanya returns home.
Tanya sees David's body strewn across the ground, blood seeping into the gray carpet.
She is shocked to discover her husband dead on the floor, murdered no less.
In this circumstance, violence ended the life of an officer.
She sobs as she dials 911, then she cries out that she needs an ambulance because her husband's been shot in the head.
The neighbors say they heard the gunshot, but the Ford kids often shoot rifles into the woods, so they initially didn't think anything of it. It's actually Tanya's screams that alert them to what's happened. They say the thunderstorm that's raging doesn't even drown out Tanya's cries.
As police race to the scene, a cloud of despair hangs over them. How is it that one of their own, a well-respected police officer whose job it is to uphold the safety of the town, wasn't safe in his own home? The answer will shock everyone. Police officer David Ford is off duty, enjoying a relaxing day at home on the morning of February 10th, 2009, when an intruder creeps into his home and murders him.
A crime as unspeakable as this doesn't happen in small towns like Campbellsville, Kentucky.
David's wife, Tanya, finds his body minutes after he's been executed. She calls 911, screaming that he's been shot in the head, and she runs to nearby neighbors for help.
Help arrives within moments, but it's too late.
Rescue EMS went right out to the home, and they discovered him, and he was pronounced dead when they arrived on the scene.
Local investigators begin to examine the scene, and the sight that reveals itself before their eyes unnerves them to their cores.
David was shot from 2 to 4 feet away, and the bullet enters the back of his head and exits his right eye. There's a pool of blood on the desk, and David had slumped to the floor, so there's blood on the carpet as well. An autopsy rules out suicide or accidental death. It's definitely homicide.
It's unspeakable for a police officer to be killed in this way, violated in the one place he should feel safe. For the cops on the scene, this isn't just another murder. This one is personal.
The investigation begins where David's life ended, in his office.
Detectives are able to determine an approximate time of death from David's final internet search history. The last website he visits has a timestamp of 11:16 a.m.
This isn't late at night or in the very early morning hours. Who kills someone at 11 a.m.? Luckily, his children are in school and away from this horrifying scene.
A handwritten note addressed to David is also recovered at the scene near his body, but it needs further processing before it can be fully analyzed.
Letters or notes are good sources of information for investigators. They can often be used to find fingerprints, saliva, or other DNA from either the victim or, in some cases, the assailant. A bullet shell is also retrieved from the crime scene. This is another important piece of evidence that can help investigators determine what kind of weapon has been used.
With 3 important pieces of evidence to consider, investigators then move on to their key witness, Tanya Ford.
Tanya tells police she was at work that morning and had just gotten off her shift.
When she came home, she saw David had been shot in the head, and she called 911. She ran over to her neighbor's house, potentially fearing that whomever killed David may still be nearby. Then she waited for police to arrive.
Because a firearm is involved, investigators must do a gunshot residue test on anyone close to the victim.
It's standard procedure to easily rule out that she didn't fire the weapon that killed her husband.
Tanya agrees. She wants to do anything she can to help find her husband's killer.
The results are negative, quickly clearing Tanya and making way for police to continue their investigation.
As is the case in most small towns, word about David's murder spreads like wildfire and leaves a community to ponder. Who could have done such an awful thing?
The reaction to his being killed, the community was devastated for losing a police officer, for losing a father, a brother, a son.
This is a small community. Lebanon has a population of roughly 6,000. So when something happens to someone, they notice. David was always willing to help someone in need, so people especially care.
3 days after his death, David Ford's funeral is held on February 13th, 2009.
It feels as though the whole town is in attendance to see David off. It goes to show just how much he was loved by his community.
And his fellow officers.
Tanya, now a widow, sits with her and David's children, 4 sons, now without a father. With everyone in a state of shock, investigators do their best to not let their emotions get the better of them. They have a job to do, and they owe it to their friend to find his killer before time runs out.
Back to work. Investigators receive the analysis of the handwritten note found near David Ford's body at the crime scene.
What the note says adds a new layer of suspicion to this mystery.
The note says, I told you to leave Mary alone. You were warned. You didn't listen.
Police don't have any idea who Mary is, but with a warning like this, their next order of business is to find out.
What was David getting into? Who sent this note? And why didn't he heed the warnings?
As investigators dig deeper, information on Mary's identity comes from an unlikely source.
Officer Brandon Blair, not only as David's friend but his partner, has knowledge of several threatening letters that David's received over the past while.
Officer Blair's intel leads them to Mary Ramos, also from Campbellsville. But the circumstances of her relationship to the case border on scandalous.
Some possible affairs that were going on within the marriages.
Mary Ramos admits to being in a relationship with David Ford.
Mary Ramos herself is married.
David and Mary had been seeing each other for some time when his murder occurred. And Mary says Tanya knew about it.
David and Tanya presented themselves in town as a strong family, a happy couple. But the truth reveals that behind the scenes, they were anything but.
Officer Ford and Tanya had sort of a tumultuous relationship. It was very up and down. It was rumored, that they were getting a divorce when, at the time of Officer Ford's death.
Apparently, they had a rocky relationship, and David planned to file for divorce next week. On the day of David's murder, he and Tanya had an appointment with their tax consultant later that day. Is that what the tax meeting was about? Divorce?
Mary and David's affair isn't just a fling either.
Mary admits to loving police officer David Ford. She says they're even temporarily staying together, and Tanya's looking for a new place to live.
Apparently, Mary and David have been living together for 3 weeks while Tanya searches for apartments so she can move out of the family home.
But David Ford is still, on the outside anyway, happily married to his wife Tanya. They have kids together, a life together. There's a lot of conflicted emotions for Mary in this messy love triangle.
Is it possible her jealous husband killed her lover? Or maybe she got tired of waiting?
Perhaps David Ford's hidden lover is angry enough at her paramour for not pulling the plug on his marriage that she pulls the trigger on him. As the investigation picks up speed, so does an ugly truth about David Ford's life. When investigators interviewed Tanya, she didn't mention the affair or potentially pending divorce.
But maybe David's mistress Mary is lying when she says Tanya knew about their affair.
Their marriage was very tumultuous and up and down, rocky. He and Tanya were no longer in a relationship, moving toward divorce, of course still married at the time of this incident.
With new information about her marriage, police question Tanya Ford and try to get to the bottom of the extramarital relationship.
Tanya didn't mention the affair when police questioned her initially.
If Tanya knew about David's relationship with Mary, could she be angry enough at her husband to shoot him dead?
When questioned, Tanya says that she loved David. They weren't in love anymore, but he was her best friend. She says separating was mutual and that they still talked every day.
Tanya shares her side of the sordid story, but nothing points to her involvement in the murder.
Police even confront Tanya about the note found at the scene. She has no knowledge of it.
Both Tanya and Mary are released. There's nothing to hold either of them on. And just like that, police are back to square one.
With a lack of suspects and hard evidence, the case of police officer David Ford's murder begins to turn cold. Something David's law enforcement colleagues swore to themselves they'd never let happen to one of their own.
This is the worst possible scenario for these officers, to not be able to get justice for one of your own. David's killer is still on the loose, and there's nothing they can do about it.
With so little to go on, Investigators turned back to Tanya Ford, David Ford's jilted wife, and the last person to see him alive. If anyone is going to shed more light on this case, police are hoping it's her.
While they don't have any direct lines pointing to Tanya Ford, they do have a motive for murder. Her husband is cheating on her. He wants a divorce. It's the best and really only lead to follow right now.
But is it enough of a reason to commit murder? Jealousy is a powerful and ugly emotion. Add on any potential embarrassment that her husband's cheating and wants to leave her? It's possible, but there's no evidence.
Police try again to speak with Tanya, but she's less cooperative this time. She wants these cops to stop wasting their time on her and get out there and find the real killer.
Tanya is frustrated. This is the third time they're interviewing her, and in the meantime, David's killer is on the loose and roaming free.
Ouch. This case is already so personal for the Lebanon Police Department, one of their own has been killed. Now, to be reminded that they might be botching the investigation, bringing Tanya in again may have done more damage than good.
Detectives are feeling the pressure. Time is quickly passing, and they still don't have any hard evidence, or even any real suspects.
Since jealousy is such a powerful motivator, detectives look into Mary Ramos's husband.
At the time of David's murder, Mary Ramos's husband was at work. It turns out he signed in at his job using a thumbprint scanner, and his boss says he was at work for the entire shift. His alibi is airtight.
Tanya is a dead end. Turns out so is the bullet casing. Without a murder weapon, officers can't link the casing to any particular gun. It's just another uncritical piece of evidence.
With the case hitting another dead end, investigators are getting desperate.
But sometimes, a clue can be staring you right in the face. You just have to be patient.
In reviewing what they have, police realize there may be more information to glean from one of the first pieces of evidence collected.
The threatening note found near David Ford's body is sent to the lab for further processing. What forensics is looking for here are fingerprints.
A clean set of fingerprints could give investigators the break they've been desperately searching for in this case. The report on the note comes back. Fingerprints have been found on the threatening letter.
And they belong to Tanya Ford. Investigators are excited about the first real break in this very personal case, but they need to tread very carefully.
Is it possible that Tanya simply accidentally touched the note during a moment of duress when she found her husband dead on the floor?
Tanya Ford's fingerprints on a threatening note are a good start. But police need something more concrete, something that separates a piece of evidence from a coincidence. They decide to keep the information about it under wraps until they can confirm one way or another.
With all eyes on the Lebanon, Kentucky Police Department as they investigate the murder of a fellow officer, they can't afford to make any more mistakes. Analysis has just come back on a letter found next to Ford's lifeless body.
The fingerprints belong to David's wife, Tanya Ford.
A fingerprint on a note doesn't mean that Tanya murdered David, and it will never hold up in court.
Since Tanya discovered the body of her husband, she may have touched the note at the scene. It's a solid lead, but it isn't enough. Investigators need more evidence to place her at the scene of the crime before David was shot.
Officers now need to reassess every single piece of evidence with a new investigative lens. And to do that, they have to start at the beginning.
Investigators begin interviewing numerous people around town, getting a better feel for David and Tanya's relationship.
Lots of times, the people who know you best, even better than you think they do, are your next-door neighbors. Investigators ask the neighbor to recall anything that may have been overlooked the morning of February 10th, 2009. The neighbor thinks, then casually drops a bombshell.
The day of David's murder, Tanya Ford told police she ran over to a neighbor's house after finding David's body because she feared whomever killed David may still be nearby.
The neighbor confirms the story. Yes, Tanya ran over. The neighbor adds that while Tanya was at the house, she washes her hands.
This is an action that could have cleaned any gunshot residue from Tanya Ford's skin, thus giving a negative result of any test.
A gunshot residue, or GSR test, is quickly and efficiently done by wiping a potentially contaminated surface, adding it to several chemical reactants, and looking for a color change reaction. If there's a reaction, you've got gunshot residue.
But the test isn't foolproof. Washing or wiping a surface off over a general lapse of time can remove gunshot residue from almost any surface, including skin. That's why it's critical the test be done as soon as possible.
The absence of gun residue does not prove that the person did not fire a gun.
Investigators, now on Tanya's trail, consider this strike number 1 against her. 2 more, and she's out. They have the note, and they know that Tanya washed her hands before the gun residue test. But it's still not enough. They need a new angle to flip the information on its head.
Investigators now reassess David's body position in Tanya's 911 call. Is there something they can link to with this information that could deliver strike number 2?
In Tanya's initial statement to police, she says she doesn't fully enter the room where David lay dead. She says she remains away from the body. She calls 911 stating, "I need an ambulance. My husband's been shot in the head."
Based on her vantage point, police determined that it's physically impossible for Tanya Ford to have seen that David Ford had been shot in the head. That's information she simply should not have.
Considering David's body position on the ground and the angle which Tanya must have peered into the room if she did not enter the room as she states, then there is no way she could know that David was shot in the head. She's either lying or she's the killer.
At this point, the evidence is starting to stack up against David Ford's wife, Tanya. But investigators need a final push to seal the deal and find justice for their fallen comrade.
Little do they know, the 3rd strike is only a phone call away. In late February 2009, investigators call Tanya Ford in one more time to talk about the day she found her husband, Officer David Ford, shot to death in their home.
There's some significant evidence slowly coming now, and it's all pointing to Tanya. But they need more.
Police want Tanya to walk them through again the hours and minutes leading up to the discovery of David's body.
Tanya reaffirmed she was at work until about 11:10 a.m. Her job is about 15 minutes away, making it impossible for her to be home when David was murdered around 11:16 a.m.
Tanya Ford works with her half-sister, so this provides a solid alibi.
Tanya was talking with her half-sister Ashley Simpson at Sonic Restaurant between 10:55 a.m. and around 11:10 a.m. Another employee corroborates this timeline.
Police are getting so frustrated, they're all around a breakthrough here. What are they missing? Their final salvation lies in the unlikeliest of sources.
The officers who did the investigation in this case kept the investigation very close, very tight. They didn't want to reveal a lot because they knew that this case would go to trial and there would likely be an appeal if she was found guilty.
Cell tower pinging is done to determine the location of a cell phone at a specific moment in time. When a phone is used to send a text or make a phone call, it pings off the nearest cell tower. This continues until the call or text goes through to its intended recipient. The call or message is also recorded on the network provider's servers. Cell phones are essentially a tracking device.
Working with a local phone company, investigators are able to access records related to Tanya Ford's cell phone usage on the day of David's murder.
The records place Tanya in the general vicinity of her family home before David's murder, not 15 minutes away in Campbellsville as she originally told police.
The two Sonic restaurant employees who corroborated Tanya's lie about being there at the time of the murder are Tanya's half-sister Ashley, and the other employee's son is Ashley's former husband. It's actually a call at 11:20 a.m. that's Tanya's biggest mistake. She calls her sister, and cell phone records show that it was made from the Graham Road area, Tanya and David Street.
And just like that, investigators have strike number 3. The strikes are stacking up against police officer David Ford's wife Tanya as the prime suspect in his February 2009 murder.
The fact that Tanya knowingly washed her hands, cleaning away any trace of potential gunshot residue, is strike number 1.
Strike number 2 against Tanya Ford comes in the form of reporting to a 911 operator that David has been shot in the head. Something she wouldn't have been able to find from where she was standing when she discovered her husband's body.
Then, cell phone pings place Tanya Ford at the scene of the crime at the time of the murder.
An arrest has been made in the 2009 murder of David Ford. 37-year-old Tanya Ford of Campbellsville.
Strike number 3.
The evidence is enough to prosecute. On October 20th, 2010, almost 2 years after David's death, Tanya Ford is arrested.
It's been 20 months of investigating, and Tanya, now 37, will be maintaining her innocence in a court of law.
David's colleagues at the Lebanon Police Department are relieved after years of unanswered questions. They finally believe they have found their friend's killer. They've done their job. Now, they hope the courts will do theirs and find justice for slain officer David Ford.
It quickly appears that that may not be the case. On November 9, 2010, just 2 weeks after Tanya Ford is arrested and charged with murder, she pleads not guilty, and she's released on $30,000 cash bond. The decision leaves a community deeply divided.
There were a lot of people who believed that Ms. Ford was guilty. Others very adamantly, likely still to this day, believe that Ms. Ford is innocent.
A police officer gunned down in his own home. His wife, accused of murder, is walking free, and there's a mistress in the mix. Never mind 4 innocent young boys who are going to grow up without a father. At this point, the town of Lebanon is a powder keg of emotion.
On August 20th, 2013, 3.5 years after 40-year-old David Ford is killed, the first-degree murder trial against his wife, Tanya, begins. It's clear the wheels of justice will turn slowly when there's so much at stake.
This is actually Tanya's 6th trial date, so needless to say, people are tired of waiting. Tanya is pleading not guilty, and prosecution is relying on circumstantial evidence. There's no murder weapon and no confession. This is an incredibly high-stakes case.
Prosecutors open their case and present every piece of evidence they have to the jury, from the fingerprints on the threatening note to the cell tower pings.
Witnesses like David Ford's next-door neighbor testify. She tells the jury that Tanya washed her hands in the moments after the murder, wiping away any gunshot residue that may have been present.
Another witness testifies that Tanya said she would kill David if she caught him cheating again, and if she thought she could get away with it. Tanya was frustrated with the affairs.
The prosecutors were very adamant that their timeline was correct, and they showed detailed. They showed footage of local stores that Tanya said she went to, showing where she was, and then they used the cell phone evidence to say, this is exactly where she was at this time.
And it wasn't at Sonic Restaurant. It was on her very street, close to her home. In their closing argument, the prosecution asked jurors to base their decisions on evidence, not on the emotion. She may be a good mom. That doesn't mean she didn't kill her husband.
The prosecution rests its case. They feel good about their case. It feels like they've drawn a direct line between the murder of police officer David Ford and his wife, Tanya.
But when it's the defense's turn to present their case to the jury, they have a trick up their sleeve that no one saw coming.
The prosecution rests their case, and the defense, in their presentation, drops a bombshell.
There was kind of a twist in this case. Miss Ford's mother, Linda Williams, she was called as a witness in the middle of the trial. It was a surprise, new evidence.
She had confessed to an undercover police officer that Tanya had called her and admitted to killing Officer Ford.
She had testified to police officers in an undercover situation that Tanya had called and confessed to killing Officer Ford.
Linda Williams, Tanya's mother, goes to an illegal drug deal and ends up telling a confidential informant that Tanya called her to say she killed her husband. This not only becomes one of the reasons the trial got pushed back, but also it was supposed to be a slam dunk for the prosecution. Then Linda gets on the stand and tells the court that she lied about that.
She then, Miss Williams then testified in court that that was in fact not true, that Tanya had never said that, and that she in fact was lying about that. So that, whether that was compelling to the jury, I don't know. It was very surprising in the case.
It's an explosive turn, and one that could bring down the whole case. Tanya had confessed murder to her mother, and now her mom is saying none of it is true. It's enough to plant seeds of doubt in the jury's mind. That's all it takes for an accused to be found not guilty.
The case closes, and the jury, consisting of 8 women and 4 men, leave the courtroom. They have a huge job ahead of them to parse out the evidence and figure out the truth. Tanya's fate and David's justice lies in their hands. It takes a long time to deliberate. The jury starts at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday, but by 8 p.m. they can't reach a unanimous decision, so they have to retire for the night and pick back up in the morning. 11 hours later, the jury returns with their verdict.
Tanya Ford is found guilty of murder. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
When Tanya hears the guilty verdict, she yells out, "Oh my God," and then collapses on the courtroom table.
While it takes 11 hours of deliberation to reach their guilty verdict, jurors only spend 5 minutes to deliberate in order to recommend the 20-year sentence.
The prosecution did not seek the death penalty in this case.
Ultimately, they believed that evidence to be true and used that to convict Miss Ford. There were a lot of people who believed that Miss Ford was guilty, and the family, Officer Ford's family, they communicated they were very relieved at her arrest and her conviction.
Tonight, 20 months after a Lebanon, Kentucky police officer was shot in the head, police believe they know who killed him.
Tanya Ford appeals the decision of the court. She tries to use her husband's friends, the cops who investigated the murder, in her favor.
In her appeal, I do remember that the presence of law enforcement in the courtroom at the trial. He argued that could have been persuasive to a jury, that they would have felt, pressured that well, these police officers who hear that they would have felt pressured to find Miss Ford guilty. That was a big argument in the appeal. That was ultimately, those who oversaw the appeal felt differently. That was not grounds for overturning the conviction.
With her appeal dismissed, Tanya Ford will be behind bars for much of her life. She's eligible for parole August 2029, when she will be 56 years old.
David Ford's 4 sons, his ex-mistress Mary, the police department, and the rest of this quiet town try to move on with their lives.
He was just one of those police officers who worked with children a lot, helped youth, who just really wanted to help people. And to me, that would be a devastating blow to lose someone like that.
There were so many affected by this case. Obviously, David and his family, but most of all the children, especially the son they share. He has to grow up without his father or his mother around because of this one incredibly tragic event.
Violence is never an answer to anything, and in this circumstance, violence and argument, ended the life of an officer, and it destroyed 2 families. And to me, it's just not worth that.
After following the evidence to an unhappy husband, a scorned wife, and a love-struck mistress, justice has been served, and David Ford's killer is finally locked up.